Hello, I am Maya Beth-Nogrees, qualified educational researcher and patient advocate for Sickle Cell Cause Action and Support Group. I am honoured to have been asked to record my readings of the entire autobiography of Dr. Neville Clare, which will be available to the community through Sickle Cell Cause in the near future. However, for my personal tribute on this 5th memorial anniversary, I'll be sharing different extracts from his book, which I hope you will enjoy. Thank you. I begin and end my tributed readings with the last paragraph from the book An Oscar for My Troubles by Dr. Neville Clare, M.A., Ph.D. In spite of all the difficulties and disappointments that continue to this day, I am happy to reflect what I have done for the patients over the years has inspired others to work in the field of sickle cell. Their testimonials and the awards I've received from the community make me very proud. I never want to be put forward for official honours or anything like that. I would refuse if I was offered. I have nothing against those who do accept honours. My own father-in-law, Dudley Dryden, received an MBE and was rightly pleased to do so. My views about the establishment are simply different and make me more inclined to take the line of those black people who have declined honours on principle. Shortly before her death, Mrs. Moody recounted how she had been at a function and a man seated at the same table recognised her and announced to the others present, "See that lady? I respect her from the bottom of my heart. In the 70s I was young. I was going to university and this lady called me about sickle cell. I didn't know anything about sickle cell and thank God today the whole country knows about it." As she commented, "At least somebody in the wilderness heard." One day in the autumn of 1977, a young mixed-race woman came to see me at our Wood Green headquarters. She introduced herself as Elizabeth Nika Enawehu, a health visitor living and working in the borough of Brent, northwest London. Elizabeth had an English mother and a Nigerian father. She told me that I had difficulty pronouncing her surname. I could call her Furlong, her mother's maiden name. She also told me that she had a relative with sickle cell trait, but knew nothing about the disorder. However, as she appeared very keen to learn about the condition, I decided to lend her my books and information materials that I had acquired from the United States. She soon joined the organisation and introduced her colleagues, Shirlene Rudder and Cynthia McLetty, to me. Mrs. Moody and I then assisted them to set up a group comprising patients and their families. Elizabeth shortly afterwards introduced us to other people in the area of Brent in northwest London when we held a meeting there in the local offices of the Community Relations Council. Arising from that meeting later, in 1977, the first official local branch of OSCA was set up. It was becoming clear that too many people wanted access to regular meetings for everything to continue to be run entirely from our headquarters. Initially, I went to most of its meetings and fundraising activities too, including the dance that I remember. At that stage, I felt it was incumbent on me to be everywhere at every event that had Oscar's name on it, but later, as I had to start to let go and delegate a bit more, especially when more branches were set up all over the country. The members from Brent included Cynthia and Shirlene, who became the first chair of the branch. I think their first secretary was Elizabeth herself. In her work as a health visitor, she was connected to the Central Middlesex Hospital in Hurlston in Brent. It was through Elizabeth that we organised another significant first, a training conference at the Central Middlesex in the same year. The aim was to raise awareness of sickle cell across those professions that might come in contact with it, not just medical people, but also social workers and so on. The main speakers were myself, Dr. Melissa Brozovic, and Dr. Diane Wolford, who was a haematologist there, and a general black practitioner from Haringey called Dr. Franklin Jacob. Dr. Watford chaired the conference. Dr. Brozovic, in particular, became very active in our cause. At around that time, she was introduced to us by Elizabeth Enawehu, and she invited as many general practitioners to attend the conference as possible from that area of London. Few people before us, of course, had heard about sickle cell and wanted to do something about it. I should mention Jeff Crawford, who was the secretary of the West Indian Standing Conference, who devoted his life to working for equality and against all manifestations of discrimination, and who sadly died recently. I'd come across him, but at the time of the launch of Oscar did not know him at all well. I did not know that at about the same time as we were starting up, he independently had approached the doctor and persuaded wanted him to write a leaflet about sickle cell, which he put out himself as a one-off measure, about an issue that he could see was of great importance. Later, we would be involved in quite a few joint projects with him, especially when he became Community Relations Officer for Haringey. Dr. Jacob, who was one of the speakers at the Central Middlesex Hospital Conference, was significant because among our general disappointment at how difficult it was in those days to get black doctors to express any public interest in the condition, he was one of the few exceptions. He was never a sickle cell expert nor involved in our work to an enormous extent, but at least he stood up and showed an interest. Other black doctors did attend the Central Middlesex Conference. Being the first of its kind, it was a curiosity, and the timing of it was right. More and more doctors were coming across sickle cell even in general practice, particularly if they served a population including a significant black community, as Brent was even then. It may be relevant that in those days black doctors tended to be found mainly among the general practitioners or the most junior ranks of hospital doctors. They found it difficult to get on in the higher branches of the profession and so found themselves working in general practice. They had no better knowledge of the then obscure topic of sickle cell than anyone else in that branch of the profession, and it may be that they were reluctant to get involved, without being qualified to lead, reluctant to be seen to be coming to a lay organisation like ours in a sense to further their medical knowledge. In the United States, by contrast, black doctors were to be found in fairly significant numbers in specialist and senior positions. In some hospitals, Dr. Jacob did not profess to have any special knowledge of sickle cell, but he was prepared to take information from our leaflets and to talk about important issues it presented for the community, in particular the need to embrace a system of screening and education. Given the general atmosphere of distrust, it helped to have a doctor who was black to stand up to say these things. One other thing I remember about that conference is that it was suggested in advance that Elizabeth might also want to be one of the speakers, but she said she would rather not. She did not feel confident enough about public speaking. Many who know her now would be surprised at that. Even then, in those early days, she was clearly a hard and committed worker for the cause. Shortly after the conference, she became our National Public Relations Officer. In that role, she often went on her own or with me to other parts of the country to see people who wanted to set up their own branches, or who just wanted to find out about what we were doing. Up until then, I'd gone to all of them when requested. I was ready to go anywhere at my own expense: Liverpool, Birmingham, Bristol, Nottingham, Leicester or Manchester. Even people like Professor Stroud would come if asked to places far afield and talk about the medical aspects of sickle cell to anyone who would listen. Back in 1976, when we launched Oscar at King's College Hospital, the audience had included as many black doctors as Professor Stroud had found to accept his invitation. We had hoped that black doctors would then become involved with us, but this did not happen to any great extent. There was always a difficulty with us as a group led by lay people, non-doctors, appearing to be telling medical professionals what they should know and be doing about this condition that was relatively new to the United Kingdom. I sensed a double sensitivity working against us where black doctors were concerned, an extra reluctance due to pride and ego to appear to be turning to us to find out more about this condition which mainly affected black people. Whatever the reasons in the early years, we found that as a group they did not want to know. This was a shame. In the United States, black doctors were always in the forefront of the movement to improve awareness and understanding of sickle cell. Over there, both prominent black politicians and black doctors were prepared to speak out stridently on the unfairness of the lack of provision and research money to deal with the condition. Neither group made themselves similarly conspicuous on the issue in Britain. It is perhaps an irony of the system of segregation in the US that it created the conditions for black doctors forced to set up their own separate training establishments and find patients to practice on from within their own community, to develop both an unrivaled expertise in the field of sickle cell and a degree of activism and determination to campaign politically for those patients. It is terrible to see sickle cell professions now under threat in many ways because of cost pressures in the NHS. It was such a long and difficult struggle to get improvements in the first place. I have mentioned about the sickle cell ward. T6 at my local hospital is set to be closed. I am sure many others around the country and centres in the community too are in a similar position. The patients will again be the ones to suffer, both directly and from knock-on effects, the loss of specialist nurses and expertise. In spite of all the difficulties and disappointments that continue to this day, I am happy to reflect that what I have done for the patients over the years has inspired others to work in the field of sickle cell. Their testimonials and the awards I have received from the community make me very proud. I never want to be put forward for any official honours or anything like that. I would refuse if I was offered. I have nothing against those who do accept honours. My own father, Lord Dudley Dryden, received an MBE and was rightly pleased to do so. My views about the establishment are simply different and make me more inclined to take the line of those black people who have declined honours on principle. Shortly before her death, Mrs. Moody recounted how she had been at a function and a man seated at the same table recognised her and announced to the others present, "See that lady? I respect her from the bottom of my heart." In the 70s, I was young. I was going to university, and this lady called me about sickle cell. I didn't know anything about sickle cell, and thank God today the whole country knows about it. As she commented, at least somebody in the wilderness heard. There are huge problems for sickle cell at the moment and so much work still to do, but a great deal has been achieved since I began in 1975. Most of this country's specialist medical facilities and the centres in the community grew out of campaign and practical projects started by Oscar and the other voluntary organisations. Without us, they would never have existed.